And what I wanted to actually discuss in these was number one, spirituality, and number two, seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. Because these two things are the things that we need the most in this world. But today we're going to start off with knowledge and the importance of knowledge and why we need to study and what has come in the Quran and the Hadith regarding studying and the importance of knowledge and seeking knowledge. So if you just look at the handouts, that first, preserving the religion within our communities and families. So the Hadith is Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَقْبِضُ الْعِلْمَ انتزاعا ينتزعه من العباد ولكن يقبض العلم بقبض العلماء. Now the Prophet ﷺ says that indeed Allah does not withhold knowledge by snatching it away from His servants, but rather He withholds knowledge by withholding the scholars. Allah takes the scholars away one at a time. حتى لا يبقى عالما, until not a single scholar remains. And when that happens, the Prophet ﷺ explained, اتخذ الناس رؤوسا جهالا. People will take ignorant people as their leaders, ignorant people as their teachers. فَسُئِلُوا فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. And now these ignorant people who do not have knowledge of the Sharia, they'll be asked all these masail, all these fatawa, all these questions, and people will come to them, because now these are the people standing in the position of the leaders. They are standing in the position of the ulama. So they'll be asked these questions. فَسُئِلُوا. And the Prophet ﷺ said, فَأَفْتَوْا بِغَيْرِ عِلْمٍ. They will give the fatwa, they give the answers to this question without proper knowledge and understanding. فَضَلُّوا وَأَضَلُّوا. They will be misguided and others will be misguided as well by means of them. So now the first question is, are we contributing to these statistics and the prophecy of the Prophet ﷺ? Do I fall under that category who have knowledge and who have studied the Sharia, who have studied the Quran and the Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ? Or do I fall under the category of those people who do not have knowledge? So first, which statistics are we contributing to? Secondly, if we are not from the knowledgeable aspect, from the aspect of, when we don't have the knowledge of the Sharia, knowledge of the ahkam and deen of Allah, then how do we stop our contribution to the side? And how do we come upon the other side? This is one famous Sahabi, I forgot his name, I think it was Ibn Abbas ibn Mas'ud. He used to say, أُغْدُ عَالِمًا أَوْ مُتَعَلِّمًا وَلَا تَكُنْ ثَالِثًا. Start each morning either as an alim, scholar, أو متعلما, or a student of religion. وَلَا تَكُنْ ثَالِثًا. Don't be a third person. So first we have to have sound knowledge of Islam. We need to know what is Islam, what's not Islam, what is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, what is not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, what is the command of Allah, what's not the command of Allah. We need to have this knowledge as an individual. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيدَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. To seek knowledge is an obligation upon every single individual. And if we look at the first verses, so alhamdulillah, you guys here are probably even more knowledgeable than me. I've just been put in this position to speak. But if we look at the first verses of the Quran, logically, if you think about it, the last time revelation came down from Allah, before the Prophet ﷺ, how many years ago was that roughly? Anyone know?
Musa, 2000 years?
Not as much as that. 600 years roughly. MashaAllah. So approximately 600 years ago, because that was the time of Isa alayhi salam. The Prophet ﷺ was born at 570 AD. So before that it was Isa alayhi salam, and he was given prophethood at the age of 40. So approximately 650 years ago, that was the last time a connection was made between Allah and humans and humankind through revelation. So imagine for approximately 600 years, no revelation has come down on this earth. There has been no connection between Allah and the creation in terms of revelation. Now 600 years, people have been engulfed in darknesses upon darknesses upon darknesses. The whole concept of morality was lost. What's right and wrong was lost. Allah, who is Allah, that we have a creator, that was even lost in many parts of the world. And if they understood there was a creator, they used to be worshipping idols to get to that creator. So people didn't even know from right and wrong. In terms of Sahaba radiallahu anhum, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, during that period, the Romans that were ruling, they ruled for about approximately 1,000 years. And then there were Persians as well. They were ruling for approximately 1,000 years. These were two superpowers at the time. The Sahaba was so bad that none of these empires wanted to rule over the Sahaba, because they were seen as barbarians. And what were we going to do by ruling over these people? Now, the first time after approximately 600 years, people are busy worshipping idols. They have no concept of morality, no concept of right and wrong. They're doing whatever they want, however they want. People are burying their daughters alive because they're embarrassed and ashamed of their daughters. Imagine that. Burying their daughters alive. Comes in some narration, Umar radiallahu anhu, the Umar that we talk about, he buried so many 100 girls with his own hands. When people, they couldn't bury their daughters because it's their daughter, they'd give them to Umar and he'd go and bury her alive. Now, logically thinking to ourselves, what would be the first command that Allah gives to humans after 600 years? Logically thinking, what do we expect Allah to command us to do? Anyone? Logically speaking, what makes sense to us? Would it be to read? Normally it would be to wahidullah, tawheed of Allah, obey one Allah, don't obey idols, don't, have justice in the world, don't be unjust, don't oppress people. That's what we think, isn't it? But the first command that came down to the Prophet ﷺ, like the brother mentioned, said, Iqra, read. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. Read in the name of your Lord that created. خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ, who created insan from a clot. اقرأ وَرَبُّكَ الْأَكْرَمُ. Read and your Lord is most generous. So the first command to the Prophet ﷺ was to gain knowledge. And the Prophet ﷺ, he was an unlettered person. He said, مَا أَنَا بِقَارِئ. He said, I'm unable to read. I don't even know how to read. So this verse was an indication that the new ummah that is about to come is not an ummah of ignorance. It's an ummah of knowledge. It's an ummah of libraries. It's an ummah of books and studying and research. It's an ummah of scholars. It's an ummah that possesses knowledge. Those people will be elevated, and people that do not have knowledge, they will not be elevated. That's what the Prophet ﷺ, he said, فَضْلُ الْعَالِمِ عَلَى الْعَابِدِ كَفَضْلِي عَلَى أَدْنَاكُمْ. Once the Prophet ﷺ, he's doing a sermon to the Sahaba, and he said to them, Fadlul alim, the virtue and the status of a scholar, i.e. a person who bears the knowledge of deen, over just an ordinary worshipper who does not have knowledge but he worships Allah. He said, Kafadli ala adnakum. The Prophet ﷺ said, is like my status over the lowest amongst you. Allah says in the Quran, هَلْ يَسْتَوِ الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Do those people that have knowledge and those people that do not have knowledge, can they ever be the same? وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Those people that have knowledge, they're far beyond everyone else. So this was an indication that this ummah is going to be an ummah of knowledge. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضًا. Seeking knowledge for every individual of this ummah is a fard. There's no such thing as ignorance in this ummah anymore. There's no such thing, hey, I was praying, I was doing this wrong, so I didn't know Allah will forgive me. There's no such thing. Because you did not fulfill the primary obligation of seeking knowledge. That's why you don't know. So number one, the importance of seeking knowledge from the first verse of the Quran. And then I've mentioned, so we can even understand from the story of Khidr alayhi salam. Let's go to Khidr. So we're going through a bit down on the sheet. The story of Musa alayhi salam. Why did Allah mention the story of Musa and Khidr alayhi salam in the Quran? I remember in the Quran, only the fundamental principles are mentioned that we need to live our life as Muslims. Allah doesn't mention everything in the Quran and goes into stories and stories and stories just so it sounds nice. Allah only mentions those things which are fundamental to us. So why did Allah, in the story of Musa alayhi salam, condemn so many things? I was just reading the tafsir of this morning, and what different scholars have said about this. So we all know the stories, and I need to narrate the entire story of Musa alayhi salam. Everyone knows what happened, isn't it? And then Allah commanded Musa alayhi salam to go to Khidr alayhi salam. So many scholars have said many different things. Number one, we understand from the story of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr that despite Musa alayhi salam being a prophet and his high status, he was commanded to seek knowledge, to go make an active effort to leave his home, travel, even the seas and the lands to go and seek knowledge from someone which is lower than him. Even the Prophet was commanded to do that. And Musa alayhi salam, not just that, he was made to go through difficulty to seek this knowledge. Allah could have said here, Allah could have commanded Khidr alayhi salam, no, this is the Prophet, this is my Prophet, is Kalimullah. He was that special Prophet who used to converse directly with Allah. Allah could have told Khidr, okay, you go to this special person and go teach him. Allah could have said that. And due to his high status, that would have made sense. But Allah wanted to show us the importance of seeking knowledge. It doesn't matter who you are, what your status is, seeking knowledge is necessary for you. You have to make effort for that. If you don't make effort, you're not going to gain any knowledge. And Ibn Hajar rahimahullah, one of the great Shafi scholars of the past, he said that anything which is valued is attained through difficulty. Musa alayhi salam's high status did not prevent him from traveling the land and the sea from attaining knowledge. And then he deduces from this incident the importance of tawadu' for seeking knowledge. When Musa alayhi salam, he went to Khidr, he didn't say to him, I'm the Prophet of Allah, you have to teach me. Anyone know his words? What he said was, هَلْ أَتَّبِعُكَ عَلَىٰ أَن تُعَلِّمَنِ مِمَّا عُلِّمْتَ رُشْدًا. Can I follow you? Can I be a follower of you? That was his words. هَلْ أَتَّبِعُكَ. This is a Prophet of Allah, Kalimullah. Not just any Prophet, one of the special chosen Prophets of Allah, going to someone who's inferior to him. هَلْ أَتَّبِعُكَ. Can I follow you? عَلَىٰ أَن تُعَلِّمَنِ مِمَّا عُلِّمْتَ رُشْدًا. So that you teach me of that guidance which you have been given, i.e. by Allah. So look at the respect and humility of Musa alayhi salam, and Allah has recorded this sentence in the Quran to be recited till today, because it is such an important statement for learning religion. Sometimes you think, I know everything, and I go to the scholar and I tell him all my knowledge that I have, and then I go and I leave the scholar thinking, oh mashallah, I taught him so much. Sometimes I've actually been called to many places. Someone asked me a question. It's a very difficult question. So they asked me. So I told them, okay, I can't reply to over text. You'd have to talk to me in person. So then I go to the person's house next. I sit down. They tell me the question, and 30 minutes they're still telling me more and more and more and more. And I told them, okay, I need to go soon. I need to tell you the answer. But then they keep talking and they keep telling me stuff, everything that they know, and the whole 1 hour is up, and I can't tell them the answer anymore, and I have to go. So when we go to first thing we have to understand, we have to have humility. I have to understand that I'm nothing and I have no knowledge. The reason why, so we have to lower ourselves to attain ilm, because if anyone was exempt from not having to have this tawad and humility and humbleness, it would have been Musa alayhi salam because of his status. But even Musa alayhi salam was not exempt from this level of humility. And Khatib al-Baghdadi, one of the famous scholars of the past, passed away about 1,000 years ago, one of the authorities in religion, he says that this incident of Musa alayhi salam and Khidr shows the status of knowledge and shows the status of those that possesses it. That even a prophet has to lower himself to come to that person who possesses knowledge. So imagine how much reverence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to knowledge and those are people that possess knowledge. And sometimes it's very easy for us to think that, think lower these people. This guy doesn't even know how to speak English, or this person like this, or this person doesn't have to communicate to the people. But we don't understand the knowledge that Allah has given of the Quran and the Hadith, the tafsir, the translation of the Quran, the commentary of the Quran, understand the Hadith knowledge that they have, the usul of Hadith, the fiqh knowledge that they have. Allah has given them mountains and mountains of knowledge, but because of that person's lack of English, we think low of these people. Or because of lack of communication to the people, we think low of those people. And that's why sometimes, Allah actually takes us away from Him. Allah says, "Man aada lillahi waliyan faqad adantuhu bil harb." Whoever scorns or has hatred towards the friends of Allah, Allah wages war against that person. So sometimes we are very far away from religion because we have hatred for the ulama, because we have hatred and we think low of the scholars. So Allah actually keeps us away from Him. That's just one very important thing to keep in mind. So first thing is we have to travel for knowledge. So that's what we understand from this, and that's what alhamdulillah that the brothers and sisters have done here as well. That we have to leave our house and we have to make a sacrifice for knowledge. Without sacrifice, we're not going to gain anything. And like I mentioned, the statement was Ibn Hajar rahimullah. So anything which is to be valued, you have to make sacrifice for that. If I didn't make sacrifice, I wouldn't be able to sit here in front of you. If I wanted to relax at home, I wouldn't be able to benefit from this talk, and neither will anyone else be able to benefit from this talk. So we have to make sacrifice. Nothing in this world, in terms of the dunya or the akhirah, will be easy. And our value will be according to the sacrifice that we make. The reason why Sahaba was so valuable is because of the sacrifice that they made. They spent their wealth, health and time behind this religion so that they became valuable. If we spend our health, our wealth and our time seeking knowledge behind this deen, then we'll also become valuable, just like the Sahaba radiallahu anhum became valuable. So we have to try and make some sort of sacrifice to try and attend these talks, and then try and get other people to attend these talks. Even if we learn one thing, alhamdulillah, we've taken the benefit from it, isn't it? So now, if I didn't make that sacrifice, then I wouldn't be able to benefit, neither will anyone else be able to benefit. And we all have our own sacrifices. Like if I woke up today, before Fajr, and I had to prepare for this talk, I think it's about 5 in the morning, because as soon as I finished preparing for this talk, I had to start studying for my class that I go to. I leave my house at 7 in the morning, and I study there, and I come home at 4:15. From 4:15, I start teaching at 4:30. And that's a 3-hour shift. So I start teaching from 4:30 till 7:30. And as soon as the class finished, there was a parent that wanted to talk to me. So that took another 5 minutes. That's why I was a couple of minutes late. And then as soon as I finished teaching, I had to come over here. And now as soon as I go back and finish this talk, I have to go back and sit down and study for another 3-4 hours, because I've got tons of work to do for the next day. I have about 5, 6, 7 questions which I need to answer and do research from. So this is sacrifice. Because if I didn't make that sacrifice, then I just wanted comfort, then no one will to benefit, and I won't be able to benefit. So I have to make my sacrifice, and everyone sitting here will have their own sacrifices. Everyone here will have their own sacrifices, but we have to be willing to make that sacrifice. If we're not willing to make that sacrifice, then we will not be valuable in the eyes of Allah. So our value is according to the sacrifice that we make. And our value in the eyes of the people as well is according to the sacrifice that we make with ikhlas. So that's the first thing. And then we just briefly discuss the etiquettes of seeking knowledge. So number 1 is commitment. Number 2 is tolerate hardships in his pursuit. And Musa was commanded, he was made to go through hardship despite him being a prophet. And he had hardships upon hardship. If you remember the story where Allah told him that you will find Khidr in the place where the fish comes alive. And when they actually went to that place, Musa and his attendant actually forgot the fish. So they had to do another extra journey of 1 day and 1 night because they had forgotten the fish. And Allah actually recorded this in the Quran, that while you're trapped, the reason why Allah actually recorded this and mentioned this to us, because what's the point of mentioning it? He forgot a fish and he had to travel a bit more. It sounds, irrelevant, but it's not. Allah is teaching us here, sometimes when you go out to seek knowledge, you will come across difficulties. Now, after these difficulties, your job isn't to go home. Your job is to overcome these difficulties. Let's say I'm going to go home and I'm going to be tired. That is your difficulty. Let's say I'm going to be, I won't be able to do some housework. That is your difficulty. So everyone will have their own difficulties. So when these difficulties come, we learn from the story of Musa that we're not supposed to give in to these difficulties and go home. Whereas Musa would have gone home. Oh, I forgot the fish, and I have to trace all my steps back, and I traveled for a day and night longer. He would have gone home. But Allah is teaching us that when difficulties come, we have to overcome these difficulties and continue to strive for knowledge. And then we will, inshallah, be successful in this. And be humble, just like Musa alayhi salam, and obey your teacher, just like Musa alayhi salam. Whoever your teacher is, you have to follow that person. With your ruh, with your physical body, with your fikr, with your minds as well. So you have to become tabi', subordinate to that person. Just how Musa, despite his high status, became subordinate to someone lower than him. Just that same way, when we go to our teacher, we have to become his subordinate. And then it's mentioned here, generally we should try our utmost best to take learning seriously and not look as if we ended here by accident. Many classes that I teach, we just have a person just lying there waiting for it to go home as if they ended up there by accident, and just waiting for it to be over so they can go home again. So we're not going to learn anything like that. Learning is something which is active. Learning isn't a passive sport, it's an active sport. So we have to engage our mind. We have to try and understand the information that's taken in. We have to make sense of the information. If we don't understand something, we have to ask the teacher, okay, I don't understand this. So it's a very active sport. It's not something which is passive. So that's the first thing which I wanted to discuss, was the importance of gaining knowledge. And the etiquettes of gaining, some of the etiquettes of gaining knowledge, and the purpose and the importance of making sacrifice for knowledge. And if you look at the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, they were the embodiments of this. I was reading about Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh. He was about 10 to 12 years old at the time when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. And I was reading and I was shocked. And I went to my class and I told my students about him. Whatever I read, I try to benefit my students. So I asked them, Abdullah ibn Abbas, we hear so much about him, that he was this scholar, he was that scholar. First book of tafsir is attributed to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, and we hear he's narrated so many hadith. Then I was reading about him and I found out that he was about 10 years old when the Prophet ﷺ passed away. He was about 10 years old. I was shocked. I thought he was like a 30, 40-year-old man and one of the greatest scholars of the day. He was a 10-year-old child. He's about 10 to 12, I think. I can't remember the exact figure. And after the Prophet ﷺ passed away, he said to his friend that, let's go study so we can be the biggest scholars of the time, the people who come to us. And his friend said to Ibn Abbas that, are you crazy? There's Abu Bakr, there's Umar, there's Usman, there's Ali, all these great, great eminent Sahaba. People are going to come to you to study? What are you talking about? Then what happened from that day, Ibn Abbas, he parted ways with his friend. So okay, you take your path, I'm going to take my path. Ibn Abbas narrated about him. He used to go to every person who's ever narrated a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. And his respect for his teacher, this is what you have to understand as well. Number one, he sacrificed as a child. So maybe those that are young can take, especially myself, we can take benefit from this. Look at his age, number one. Number two, what he used to do, he used to go to his teacher's house, whoever wanted to learn from, and he used to sit outside of the door. Just sit down. He did not want to disturb his teacher by knocking on the door. So he used to sit there. So when the teacher comes out of his house by chance, due to a need, then I'll ask him my questions or whatever I want to learn from him. So he used to sit there. Imagine a child, you leave your house and a child just sitting there, covered all in sand and dust, and he's been there probably for hours and hours, just waiting for you to come so he can learn something from you. Imagine such a child. And this is what he done. And years later, he met his friend again. And now he wasn't just an Ibn Abbas anymore. He became the Ibn Abbas, the scholar of the time. And then his friend told him, I remember when you told me let's go search for knowledge, and I rejected the idea thinking it was ridiculous. But today, look at where I am and look at where you are. So Ibn Abbas became Ibn Abbas and became valuable due to his commitment, due to the sacrifice that he made. Imam Bukhari rahimahullah in his Sahih Bukhari, he mentions the incident. He writes the chapter Babul Khuruji fi Talab al-Ilm, the chapter of leaving or traveling for searching knowledge, for the seeking of knowledge. And he mentions the incident of Jabir ibn Abdullah. He says, وَرَحَلَ Jabir ibn Abdullah is a Sahabi companion. He just gives an example of how the Sahaba became valuable. He says that Jabir ibn Abdullah traveled masirata shahrin, the distance of 1 month journey, إِلَىٰ عَبْدِ اللَّهِ ibn Unais fi hadithin wahid. So he traveled for 1 month to see Abdullah ibn Unais to learn one hadith from him. To learn one hadith, he traveled the distance of 1 month. This Imam Bukhari is saying in his Sahih. And he's actually indicating to another hadith he actually mentioned in his Adab al-Mufrad. And I checked through it and I quoted it. He mentions a whole incident. In his Sahih, because of the authenticity, he just mentioned something briefly, which he mentioned in another book. So in his Adab al-Mufrad, he explains the incident. And he says, Jabir ibn Abdullah, he narrates, that بلغني عن رجل من أصحاب النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم حديث سمعه من رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So he said, Jabir ibn Abdullah, he narrates regarding himself that a hadith came to him. Someone told him a hadith that such a person is narrating this hadith and he's quite far away from you. So when he heard that this person narrating such and such a hadith, first thing he done, فَاشْتَرَيْتُ بَعِيرًا. He says, I bought a camel. ثُمَّ شَدَدْتُ رَحْلِي. I packed my bags. Imagine, he had a hadith that someone's narrating from such and such a place. First thing he does, goes to the marketplace, buys a camel, packs his bags. فَسِرْتُ إِلَيْهِ شَهْرًا. I took a journey of 1 month. حَتَّى قَدِمْتُ الشَّامِ. Until I arrived in Sham, which is present day Syria and all these places. فإذا عبد الله ibn Unais, then I found Abdullah ibn Unais. فقلت للبواب, so Abdullah ibn Unais, he was a Sahabi, so he had someone at his door. So he said to the door person, قال له جابر, قال له جابر على الباب فقال ابن عبد الله قلت نعم. So Jabir Abdullah, he came to the house and he said, is this Abdullah ibn Unais' house? And said, yes, this is his house. And then Abdullah ibn Ubays, he comes out, فَاعْتَقَنِي, he says that Abdullah ibn Ubays, Abdullah ibn Unais, he hugged me. فَقُلْتُ حَدِيثٌ بَلَغَنِي عَنْكَ أَنَّكَ سَمِعْتَهُ مِنْ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. First thing he said to him, so he meets Abdullah ibn Unais. Abdullah ibn Unais hugs him because he knows who he is, the companions. And the first thing Jabir says to Abdullah, he says, some news came to me that you're relating this hadith. That's what he says. Then he says, فَخَشِيتُ أَنْ أَمُوتَ أَوْ تَمُوتَ قَبْلَ أَنْ أَسْمَعْهُ. I feared that I may die or you may die and I have not heard this hadith. So I quickly came. So I packed my bags as soon as I could and I quickly came to you. And then he says, فَقَالْ سَمِعْتُ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ يَقُولُ يَحْشُرُ اللَّهُ النَّاسَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ عُرَاةً غُرْلًا بُهْمًا قُلْنَا مَا بُهْمًا قَالَ لَيْسَ مَعَهُمْ شَيْءٍ. Then Abdullah ibn Unais, he narrates the hadith there and then. He says that Allah will resurrect the people on the day of judgment, unclothed, without, without anything, buhman, without anything whatsoever, just there, themselves in that state. And then, the lengthy hadith continues. I'm not going to narrate that; it's going to be too long. And he said just one hadith. So this was the zeal and the desire Sahaba radiallahu anhum showed to attain knowledge. This is how much was in them. Now if we compare that with ourselves, every day that goes by, how much zeal do I have in attaining the knowledge for the deen of Allah? Because we can say that, deen is the most important thing, Quran is the most important thing, Prophet ﷺ is the most important thing, his life is the most important thing. Very easy to say. Actively, how much am I doing to attain this knowledge in my life? How much am I doing? Compare this to the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, because they are the examples. Allah aminu kama amana an-nas. Believe like the Sahaba were believers. That is the criteria in front of Allah. Now we can't be exactly like them, we can follow their path, isn't it? The Sahabi says, "Ughdu aliman wa muta'alliman." Spend the morning as a scholar or a student and don't be a third. So we should either be a scholar of religion or be a student of religion. One of these. So that's the first thing. So we should have the zeal, inshallah, to want to learn, want to come to these gatherings, want to come to these talks, to want to go to scholars and learn from them. So that's the first thing. And the second thing which I want to do is the spiritual activity. What I want to do in these lessons is I don't want to just do a talk and we've heard something very nice and then we go home and it doesn't bring any change to ourselves. I want to take the maximum benefit of us coming here. So what we'll try and do is inshallah, if I can, we'll try and select a spiritual activity to do so we'll take out 5 minutes to do an activity. So for example, let's say we're discussing the virtue of dhikr. So we'll spend 5 minutes to do the dhikr of Allah. Let's say we discuss the virtue of performing salah, nafil salah. We'll try and take out some time and maybe within the gathering to bring that into action. Because sometimes what happens is we listen to something, a good talk or whatever, with the intention of acting upon it later. What happens is that later it never comes. And then 10 years, 20, 30, 40 years goes by and that later still never comes. So maybe inshallah if we learn something in the gathering, we can act upon it in the gathering. So when we go back, then it will be an encouragement for us to continue doing it because we've already started. Does that make sense? I think that will be beneficial inshallah. It will be beneficial for me. But because of the lack of time today, we won't start this today. We'll start it maybe next week inshallah. So we'll keep the talk a bit shorter and the main talk, and we'll go accordingly inshallah. So I'm going to skip to the next side, right? So I'm going to skip the spiritual activity. We'll discuss that next lesson next week inshallah. So building our community, which I thought I'll discuss it. When I came to the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ regarding the first verses, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. And I started reading and I looked into Sahih al-Bukhari, see what that said, and looked at the different narrations of it. Then I started looking at its commentary. Sometimes you just start reading, just go on and on and on. It's like a bad habit. So then I thought, okay, let me talk about building the community, because from the sit my glasses this way. So I thought, let me just discuss building the community, because that's what you understood from the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and I'll, the hadith of Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. And I'll tell you how I got to that conclusion. Okay, so the hadith I was just discussing right in the beginning, the first revelation to come to the Prophet ﷺ, where Jibreel came and said, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, khalaqal insana min alaq. The first verse that you came to read, which I discussed, isn't it? And I'll mention a side point as well. The narration says that the Prophet ﷺ was sweating profusely. And he went to Khadija radiallahu anha, and he said to her, Zammiluni, Zammiluni. I'm sure everyone knows, isn't it? He said, Zammiluni. Anyone know what that means? Anyone?
Cover me.
Yeah, cover me, cover me. He was cold. And when I actually came across this, it didn't even occur to me. Why was the Prophet sweating, number one? And why was he cold? When I found out, it's like an enlightenment for me. The reason why the Prophet was sweating is because the Quran was very difficult for a human being to bear. So it's just a side point. Allah says regarding the Quran, لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل لرأيته خاشعا متصدعا من خشية الله. That if we were to reveal this Quran upon a mountain, the entire mountain would come crashing into pieces. This is how powerful and heavy this Quran is. Sometimes the Prophet he describes, in the Quran. So I was discussing with our boys class, the 14 plus boys class, different modes and different ways the Quran was revealed. And the Quran was very heavy and very difficult. Sometimes the Prophet, while he was riding on an animal and revelation would come to him, the revelation would be so heavy, the camel would not be able to move any further. It would have to sit down. Once Zayd ibn Thabit, he was sitting down, and the thigh of the Prophet ﷺ was on the thigh of Zayd. And then revelation started to come. Zayd ibn Thabit, he explains that the thigh of the Prophet ﷺ became so heavy, and he says in his own words, that I thought my thigh would turn into pulp. So the revelation was very difficult for the Prophet ﷺ to handle, to bear. So the reason why the Prophet ﷺ was sweating is because he was his body was exerted more than his body could bear. It's like going to the gym and working out, doing so much so quickly. So that's why his body was sweating. And normally what happens is, once you're doing a very intense workout or an exercise, and you stop immediately, your body becomes cold. So that's why when the Prophet ﷺ went to Khadija radiallahu anha, he said, Zammiluni, cover me, cover me. Because that exertion had immediately stopped, and his body became cold. So that's why he told Khadija radiallahu anha to cover him. So when I found that out, it's like, wow, mashallah, do you know that? So I just thought I'd just present it before you. So the Prophet, so now I'm going to the real point I was about to mention. So the Prophet ﷺ, he went to Khadija radiallahu anha, and he said to her that وَلَقَدْ خَشِيتُ عَلَى نَفْسِي, that I fear that my life will be over because of the pain and what he had to go through. If it continues to keep on carrying on, my body will not be able to bear this pain, and I think I'm going to die. Anyone know what Khadija radiallahu anha said to him? When I first read this in Sahih al-Bukhari about 3-4 years ago, I was in my class and I came across the hadith. I memorized these words because they were so important to me. And these words, I think they changed everything. Anyone know what these words were? What she said? First she said, "Kalla wallah ma yukhzika Allahu abada." She said, never. Allah will never disgrace you. So that's a very, very big claim to make. The Prophet just said that, I think I'm going to die because this incident. And she says, never, Allah will never disgrace you. So that was a big claim. So now what's her substantiation of this claim? What's her proof? Anyone know what she said to him? Anyone know? So now Khadija radiallahu anha is going to do? Sorry?
He's just recalling his virtues, things that he did for people.
Yes, he recorded, she summarized the good qualities and the virtues of the Prophet ﷺ in this statement. That's why this hadith is so important. And that's why I had to memorize this hadith. So now, what was it? Remember, if you understand the context of this hadith, The Prophet ﷺ, for the last couple of years, he used to go and meditate in the cave of Hira. He used to go, sometimes he'd be there for days and days and days. Only when food would run out, he'd come back home, spend some time with the family, then go again. He just spent, days and days of solitude, just thinking about Allah, doing the dhikr of Allah, worshipping Allah. And that's something very great for an ordinary person to do. Imagine if one of us used to do that. And let's say if I, go away every weekend and I just by myself and I just do salah all night and fast all day. When people record my virtues and talk how great I am, they're going to mention all these things I do, isn't it? That he goes every weekend, he prays salah all night, does dhikr all day and reads Quran all day. They're going to talk about all these things. But Khadija radiallahu anha, did she talk about the worship of the Prophet in this hadith?
No.
She didn't even mention the worship of the Prophet ﷺ. What she mentioned was,
Sadiq and Ameen.
she didn't even mention Sadiq and Ameen.
Oh, okay.
According to one narration, she actually said you're truthful. Actually, in one narration there is. In one narration of Bukhari, there's that addition isn't there. But in one narration there is, yes. She said, first quality, إِنَّكَ لَتَصِلُ الرَّحِمِ. Indeed, you join family ties. You join family relations. First quality. وَتَحْمِلُ الْكَلْ. You bear the burden of others. And those people, the weak, that aren't able to bear their burden, whether it's financially, whether it's physically, whatever it is, you bear their burden. وَتَكْسِبُ الْمَعْدُومِ. For those people that are unable to earn, you earn. وَتَقْرِ الضَّيْفِ. You look after the guests. وَتُعِينُ عَلَى نَوَائِبِ الْحَقِّ. In every instant, in every moment of truth where help is required, you are there to help. These were the qualities that he mentioned. And in another narration of Sahih al-Bukhari, then that comes your statement, وَتَصْدُقُ الْحَدِيثِ, and you're truthful in your words. But in the other narration, that addition actually isn't there. So all these qualities, I'm going to list them again. Tasilul Rahim, they join family relations. Taksibul Ma'adum, you earn for others that can't earn. Watahmilul Kal, you bear the burden of others. Wataqlid Daif, you look after the guests. Watu'inu ala nawaib al-haq, you support in every event, in every moment of the truth, wherever support is needed. Now all these qualities, what are they to do with? In one word, anyone summarize them?
Community. Yeah.
Community, service, khidmah. She did not mention his worship, his long nights in prayer, his dhikr, his salah, none of these things. She mentioned, and this was her greatest proof that Allah will not destroy this person, because he is a person that serves the community. He is the one that looks after the community. How can Allah destroy that person who's looking after the slaves of Allah? Now think about ourselves. How can, normally we think, hey, I can just come close to Allah, I'll do my 5 times salah, I'll do my dhikr, alhamdulillah will save me. This was the virtue of the Prophet ﷺ. Khadija radiallahu anha summarized the 40 years of the Prophet ﷺ in this one sentence. His service for the community and his worrying concern for others, not himself. No, salah is worrying concern for yourself. Dhikr is worrying concern for yourself. Reciting Quran is worrying concern for yourself. But his major quality is worrying concern for the community. Now we as Muslims, we have to try and build our community. We have to worry about those people that no one's worrying about. We have to worry about our brothers and sisters. We have to make that exerted effort to build this community. So first of all, the way we start doing that is, number one, we come to these talks, we come to the masjids, and we bring others with us as well. So it shouldn't be that I'm just benefiting from this, or he's just benefiting. We should want others to benefit from this as well. And then I listed a few number of ways to help build our community. And the first has to be on our list is to attend the masjid regularly. That has to be number one on our list, because the center of the community is the masjid. Doesn't matter which masjid, where the masjid is, who's running the masjid, the center of the community is the masjid. So we have to make that effort that we build that community environment in the masjid as well. That's the first thing. And then I've listed a few things. Love for others, what you love for yourself. Famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. None of you can be a true believer until he loves for his brothers what he loves for himself. You look after your neighbors, and Islam, your neighbors, and just one on the right and one on the left. 40 doors, 40 people in front of you, 40 behind you, 40 houses on your right, 40 houses on your left. These are your neighbors. The Prophet ﷺ said, none of you can be a true believer if he goes to sleep with a full stomach while his neighbor is hungry. None of you can be a believer, the Prophet ﷺ said. So we have to look after our neighbors, love our neighbors, build a community. And then the last two, I'm just going to skip to that. prohibition of backbiting and slander, prohibition of jealousy. The reason why these things are major sins in Islam, backbiting, Allah likens that to eating the flesh of your brother. If you backbite, and backbiting means, by the way, not to lie about someone. Backbiting is when someone has a fault and you spread that fault to other people. Let's say someone has, this bad habit, and I go and talk about this, which is true, to someone else. This is what we call backbiting, by the way. The reason why these things are such major sins in Islam and such big sins, because they destroy unity. They destroy the community. If I'm backbiting and talking bad about others, there's not going to be unity left between me and that person. That's why these things is such a big sin to backbite, to slander, to have jealousy of others, because these are the things that destroy a community. And the Prophet's legacy of the Prophet ﷺ was how to build a community. Islam is founded as a community. That's why, according to many scholars, it is wajib to pray salah in the masjid. According to other scholars, sunnah mu'akkada, just one level below the wujub, wajib, compulsory. Because in Islam, it's not something I'm just going to pray by myself and worry about my own self. If you don't want to, Allah forces us to come out of our houses and go to the community. And that's why the hadith I mentioned as well, I'm going to finish with this. The believer who interacts or intermingles with people and remains patient or endures their harm is better than he who does not socialize and exercise patience due to people's harm. So the Prophet is saying that person who intermingles with the community is far better than that person who doesn't and just worries about himself. So first thing we can take from this gathering, inshallah, is number one, the need to learn. It doesn't matter what age it is, what I know already, how great my status is, how old I am, how many kids I have. It's my responsibility as a Muslim to learn. It's my job to learn, it's your guys' responsibility to learn. And we have to follow the example of Musa alayhi salam in this, and the example of the Sahaba radiallahu anhu in this, and whatever hardships come across our way, we have to exert ourselves and we have to overcome these hardships. So that's our responsibility first, number one responsibility as a Muslim. And then I didn't go into the spiritual activity, but then and number two is have this in mind. How can my life be spent serving the community? Me as an individual, what has Allah given me that I can give back to the community? وَمِمَّا رَزَقْنَاهُمْ يُنْفِقُونَ. From whatever Allah has given the believers, they spend from that. If Allah has given you intellect, use your intellect for the community. If Allah has given you health, use your health for the community. If Allah has given you wealth, use your wealth for the community. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to continue to seek knowledge until our death. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to make the service of the community one of our highest priorities. So if anyone has any questions or anything, they can ask me.